Hey everyone, I'm Pastor Micah, the pastor of All Nations Church, and today we're starting a new series called Act 1, Birth of the Church. And before we get into today's series, we need to take a slight step back. It's just a few weeks ago, we were celebrating Easter, where we read about and heard about a couple of groups of people going to the tomb where Jesus was buried, seeing the stone rolled away and only seeing the burial cloths inside and no body, because Jesus wasn't there. He was risen from the dead. And after being risen from the dead, a lot of different things began to happen. A couple people encountered him as they were walking from Jerusalem back to Emmaus. And even more miraculously, behind a locked and closed door, Jesus appears to his disciples. And it's this wonderful moment where they get to see their friend, their shepherd, their leader, and their teacher for another moment. And they get to look at him. And they get to see his body, and they get to place their hands into where the nails were driven. They get to put their hands in his side to see where he was stabbed. They get to eat with him. And most importantly, they get to listen to him again. They get to hear him again. And they get to receive his teaching and to receive those final things that they needed to know and they needed to hear in order to go from Jesus' disciples, his students, to his apostles. The ones who were sent out into the world to be the first pastors for the church. And that's where we find ourselves today. With one foot in and one foot out, Jesus is still with his disciples for a moment, but he's getting ready to leave. He's getting ready to ascend back into heaven, to take his rightful place again at the right hand of the Father, to reign and rule where he's meant to be as the creator of all things, to keep things in check the way he's meant to as our God. And I can only imagine for the disciples that caused them a moment of panic, a moment of fear, and a moment of anxiety. Just think, for the last 3 years they had abandoned everything they knew and had been following Jesus, seeing him perform miracles, eating with him regularly, being his friend, going through trials and tribulations, probably laughing at jokes. I would love to hear a line of Jesus' jokes. I'm sure they were off the charts. But he's getting ready to leave. And we are all too familiar with how change can impact our life. I do this to my wife maybe too many times. I always tell her that I'm going to make things stable and that I'm not going to change our home life or my work life or my study life for a number of years just so we can have a moment of stability. And then I do things like take an interim call to be a pastor of a church. And then for the moments for us, when we're trying to figure out what this new change is like, there's fear. What is my time going to be like with my family now? There's some anxiety. How am I going to do all the things that I'm meant to do? There's challenges to overcome. How can I get to know this new group of people in order to be their shepherd? And in the midst of all of this challenge, of all this struggle, of all this fear and all of this anxiety, I have peace, not from within, but from without. Because before Jesus ascends back to heaven, he fulfills a promise to the disciples. He gives them a final parting gift. Jesus sends the Holy Spirit to them so that they are not alone. In fact, it's the same Holy Spirit that Jesus sends to the apostles to give them the power, authority, and ability to begin the church that he gives to us in baptism. You see, this is where we encounter God today in our story. The very beginning, the early church. And going back to the beginning of Acts, we not only see the history of the early church, we see our history. And we're going to get to what that looks like a week from now. But today, we're going to encounter the beginning of the church. We're going to look into our past so that we can have hope for our future. So as you begin your conversation today, I hope your conversations are fruitful and beneficial and God-filled, and that you encounter Jesus in his word, and that it carries you through for another day. Have a blessed time, everybody.